Hi guys, tonight we step away from the glow of our screens into the absolute dark of a city under siege. Not a dark of peace, but a dark imposed by law. In 1917 London, the blackout is total. No street lamps, no neon signs, no welcoming shine from a neighbour's window. It's the kind of historical detail that feels dramatic in a film. But if you had to actually live through it, waking to a blindness so complete you couldn't see your own hand, you'd understand that the deepest challenge wasn't always the distant enemy. It was the relentless, quiet weight of the everyday, the cold you couldn't escape, the hunger that was never fully satisfied, the silence that was always listening for the sound of engines in the sky. You probably wouldn't last a week, not without learning a new kind of endurance. So, before you adjust to this profound dark, if these journeys into the lived past resonate with you, take a moment to like and subscribe. And while you're here, I'd love to know, where are you listening from? And what time is it for you right now? It's always fascinating to see where in the world this story finds a quiet moment. Now, let's let our own light fade and begin. The first thing you notice is not a thing at all. It is an absence so total it has a weight, a texture. This is not the soft dark of a room at night. This is a void, a blindness. You open your eyes and see exactly nothing. No faint shape of a window, no grey outline of furniture, no comforting red gleam of a clock. There is only a blackness so profound it feels like a substance, like oil pressing against your pupils. You blink and the nothingness remains. This is the blackout. It is not an atmospheric effect. It is the law. It is a city holding its breath. A million windows deliberately blinded, every crack and keyhole plugged, every sliver of light deemed a betrayal, a beacon for death from the sky. You lie perfectly still, and your hearing strains to fill the void. The house itself seems to be listening. You hear the slow, shallow pull of someone else's breath nearby, the faint rustle of bedding as a body turns in sleep. These sounds are intimate, magnified by the dark. Beyond them, there is a silence you have likely never known. No distant traffic, no electronic hum, not even the occasional clip-clop of a late horse on cobbles. The great machine of London has been switched off. The city is mute and sightless. You move a hand from beneath the covers, and the cold of the room kisses your skin immediately. You reach out, fingers probing the dark, finding the familiar landscape of the bedside table by touch alone. The wood grain, a small chip in the edge, the dry, dusty surface. Your hand closes around the matches. The strike when it comes is a shocking violence. A hiss. A flare of sulphur that stings your dark-adapted eyes. A brief, beautiful sun that reveals for a fleeting second the curve of a bowl, the corner of a frame, before it settles into the small, trembling globe of a candle flame. You shield it instinctively with your hand, not from the wind, but from the law. This tiny, fragile light is now a precious and dangerous commodity. It reveals your world in a pool of weak, amber flicker. The room is small, the ceiling low. The walls, once perhaps a cheerful wallpaper, are now just a pattern of shadows dancing over a faded, sombre background. The window is a solid block of black, framed by the heavy, funereal drape of the blackout curtain. You see the strips of brown paper pasted in a careful grid across the glass, a futile lattice meant to hold the panes together against the shock of a blast. It is a gesture like so many now, more about the feeling of doing something than the certainty it will work. This absolute dark has reshaped time itself. You do not wake because a clock tells you to. You wake because your body, trained by exhaustion and anxiety, has finished its ration of shallow, broken sleep. The night is not a single, continuous rest. It is a series of fragments, punctuated by moments of wide-awake stillness where you stare into the black and listen. You listen for a sound you dread more than any other, the low, throbbing drone of engines in the sky. They have not come for many nights, but the fear is a habit now, etched into your nerves. So you wake at 4 a.m, not from freshness, but from a vigilance that never fully sleeps. In this enforced blindness, older rhythms return. You find yourself waiting for the moon, if there is one. A clear night with a full moon is a double-edged sword. It paints the outside world in a ghostly silver, making travel less perilous, but it also makes the city a perfect target. You learn to read the quality of the darkness. Is it the thick, woolly black of cloud cover, or the slightly thinner star-pricked black of a clear sky? Your ancestors knew these signs. You're relearning them out of necessity. The gaslit city of 1913, that brilliant, blazing monument to progress, is gone. In its place is this ancient starlit vulnerability. You're waiting not for the sun, but for the first permissible greyness, the official easing of the dark that will allow you to see your own hands without feeling like a criminal. The cold is the next truth. It is not the crisp, seasonal cold of a winter morning. It is a damp, penetrating chill that has settled into the very bones of the building. It seeps from the walls, rises from the floorboards, hangs in the still air. Coal is not just expensive, it is rationed, doled out with the same bureaucratic care as sugar or butter. What you have is saved for cooking and for a few precious hours of evening warmth. The nighttime cold is something you simply endure. You pull the blankets higher. They are heavy, their weight more comforting than their warmth. The fabrics are rough, worn thin by years of use and wartime soap. The bed itself is often shared now, a child, a sibling, a parent. Privacy, like warmth, is a luxury that has been surrendered. The house is full in a way that feels crowded, and empty in a way that feels hollow. Sons, husbands, brothers are gone. In their place, perhaps, have come others. An aunt bombed out of her home in the East End. A cousin's children sent from a coastal town feared vulnerable to invasion. The house breathes with the rhythms of these temporary residents, a shifting population bound by shared fear, rather than simple family ties. The space is rearranged, repurposed. A parlour becomes a bedroom, a landing holds a cot. Every room serves multiple purposes, none of them perfectly. You can hear the whole structure settle around you. The faint groan of a floorboard from the room above, the rattle of a loose window sash in its frame, the soft, persistent drip of condensation from a cold water pipe. This is not the sound of a home at rest. It is the sound of a structure under a quiet, constant strain. When the dark finally begins to soften, it is not with a sunrise, but with a gradual, grudging lightening from black to charcoal grey. Shapes emerge as if from deep water. The solid block of the wardrobe, the slope of a chair back. You move carefully, the rustle of the straw-filled mattress loud in the quiet. The process of rising is slow, a negotiation with the cold. Your feet find the floor, and the shock of the icy boards is a sharp, grounding pain. You shuffle to the window, your hand finding the rough fabric of the blackout curtain. You do not open it yet. You stand there, a sentry at the edge of the permissible, waiting for the grey to become dawn, for the official all-clear of daylight. Only then do you draw the curtain back, just a few inches. The world outside is a study in monochrome. The familiar street is there, but it looks tired, grim. The buildings are streaked with soot and damp. Many windows wear the same crisscross bandages of paper tape. Sandbags, once a bright, tidy beige, are now slumped and discoloured at doorways. There is no colour. Everything exists in shades of grey, brown and black. It is a city drained of its lifeblood. Turning from the window, you begin the ritual of dressing. This is not an act of choice or expression. It is the careful donning of a uniform for a battle fought on the home front. The clothes you lift from the chair are heavy with meaning and wear. For a woman, the layers are practical. Underthings are simple, sturdy, mended until the original fabric is a memory. Stockings, if you have them, are darned at heel and toe into a topographic map of careful preservation. The dress is dark, navy, brown, charcoal, a colour chosen to hide dirt and soot. Its hem is shorter than it would have been 3 years ago, a concession to the shortage of cloth and the need for mobility in a world where everyone walks, queues and works. The fabric is thin, often a rough government standard material that chafes the skin. There are no extra buttons, no decorative trims. Every scrap has been saved, every thread counted. You might put on an apron already, anticipating the day's labour of cooking, cleaning and mending. For a man not in khaki, the clothing speaks of a different kind of service. A suit, its cloth gone shiny at the elbows and knees, its cuffs carefully turned to hide the fray. A collar that has been detached, starched and reattached so many times the points have gone soft. A tie, it's not a habit of respectability rather than style. The clothes are old, preserved not out of sentiment but necessity. The concept of a wardrobe full of choices is absurd. You have what you have, and sometimes what you have belonged to someone else. You might fasten a pair of braces that once held up a brother's trousers. You might pull on a sweater knit for a son who will never feel the English chill again. The wool is scratchy against your skin, and in that discomfort is a memory, a ghostly presence that is both a comfort and a weight. Dressing becomes an act of communion with absence. You smooth down the front of a jacket, and your hand passes over a patch where a bullet or a piece of shrapnel tore through it on a French field now neatly and visibly repaired. The garment is whole again, but the body that wore it is not. This is the unspoken reality of the morning ritual. You're armouring yourself not just against the cold and the grime of the city, but against the grief that waits in the quiet moments. When you're finally dressed, you stand in the grey light, feeling the clothes settle on your shoulders. They do not fit perfectly. They're shaped by other lives, other labours, but they are yours for now. They mark you as a civilian, as a survivor, as someone still here, still putting one foot in front of the other in a world where so many have stumbled and fallen. The empty stomach, the cold feet, the rough wool against your neck, these are not miseries. They are proof. Proof that you have made it through another night. Proof that the day, with all its demands and its scant rewards, is once again yours to meet. The outside air hits you like a cold wet cloth. It is not yet dawn, but the sky has lightened to a dull, uniform grey, the colour of a soiled sheet. You pull your coat tighter, feeling the thin wool offer little defence against the damp chill that seems to rise from the very pavement. You are not alone. From every doorway, every turning, figures emerge, all moving with the same resigned purpose. They converge into a stream, a silent river flowing toward the same few points. The bakery, the grocers, the butchers, if there is any hope left for meat. You join the tributary, falling into step. The sound is a soft, shuffling symphony of worn soles on damp stone, punctuated by the occasional dry cough or the cleared throat. No one speaks loudly. Conversations are hushed, practical, carried on in murmurs that blend into the morning mist. You take your place at the end of a queue that already stretches halfway down the block. There is no pushing, no complaint about the length. This order is sacred. It is the new civility. You stand. The cold begins its slow invasion. It seeps through the thin soles of your shoes, numbing your toes. It creeps up your legs, settles in the small of your back. You shift your weight from foot to foot, a small unconscious dance against the discomfort. The basket on your arm feels light, ominously so. You clutch your ration book in your other hand, a small paper-bound Bible of survival. Its pages are a grid of tiny coupons, each one a printed rectangle of potential sustenance for 1 week. So many ounces of sugar, bacon, butter, tea, lard, meat. Using them requires a general's foresight. Do you spend the meat coupon today on whatever gristly, dubious cut might be left, or save it, gambling that next week's offering might be better? The book is flimsy, already soft at the edges from constant handling. Its official stamps and signatures are your only claim to what the Empire deems your fair share. You see others clutching theirs, flicking through the pages doing silent calculations. A woman ahead of you consults a tiny notebook, her lips moving soundlessly as she tallies ounces and pence. The queue is a great leveller. Here, the clerk's wife in her carefully mended coat stands behind the charwoman in her scratchy shawl. The elderly retired colonel, his posture still erect, waits his turn behind the young factory girl with tired eyes. The war has imposed this new, quiet democracy of want. You are all citizens of the same hungry realm. You watch the line ahead. Its movement is glacial, a slow, collective shuffle forward every few minutes. Faces are pale, set in expressions of patience so deep it resembles numbness. Eyes are downcast, studying the pavement, or fixed on the shop door as if will could make it open faster. The low murmur of conversation is a tapestry of anxiety and shared knowledge. They had oranges at Pirk's yesterday, gone in 10 minutes. Don't bother with the butter, it's that awful white muck again. My book says I'm due my sugar, but he said last week the allocation was short. It is not gossip. It is intelligence, vital for navigating the day. You listen, absorbing it, adding it to your own mental map of scarcity. Finally, you cross the threshold. The shop bell gives a tired jingle. The air inside is close, carrying a faint, ghostly aroma of all the things that are no longer there. The rich smell of coffee, the sweetness of currants, the earthy scent of potatoes piled high. Now, the smell is of bare wood, dry paper and disappointment. The shelves, once groaning with imperial bounty, are half empty. Tins are displayed like museum pieces. Sacks behind the counter look lean. The grocer, a man you've known for years, looks older, his face etched with the strain of being the bearer of perpetual bad news. The transaction is wordless, efficient. You lay your book on the counter. He finds the page, tears out the correct coupon with a precise rip. His hands are swift, measuring out a pat of margarine, scooping a few ounces of tea from a large caddy into your own tin. The bacon, when he produces it, is a thin, pale slice. He wraps it in a scrap of paper. You hand over the coins, which he counts twice. A nod passes between you. No thanks are necessary. It is a transaction stripped of all ceremony, a simple transfer of coupons and coins for a handful of items that already feel insufficient. You place them in your basket, and their meagre weight is a heavier burden than a full load. As you turn to leave, you catch the eye of the next person in line. You see your own resignation mirrored there. You step back into the grey light, the bell jingling behind you like a sigh. The walk home is a retreat. The basket bangs gently against your leg, a dull rhythm of shortage. The kitchen, when you enter, is the coldest room in the house. You set the basket down and face the next task, the alchemy of breakfast. You light the gas ring. It sputters to life with a low pop. The flame a small blue-yellow halo that gives more light than heat. This is the theatre of substitutes. The kettle is filled sparingly. While it heats, you take down the bread. It is the national loaf, government standard, wholemeal and dense. It is not baked for pleasure, but for sustenance. Its crust is tough. Its interior a damp, grey-brown crumb that smells faintly of yeast and something earthier. You slice it thinly, knowing it must last. The margarine waits, a pale, unappetizing block. It is hard from the cold, and your knife skids over its surface before catching to scrape off a meagre portion. It does not melt invitingly on the warm bread. It sits there, a greasy smear. The tea is its own ritual. You open your personal tin, the precious leaves inside already fragmented from careful reuse. You measure a scant spoonful into the pot. The water, when it boils, is poured over them, releasing not the rich, fragrant steam of pre-war tea, but a wan, bitter aroma. For coffee drinkers there is no coffee. There is camp coffee, a thick, sweet syrup. Or there is chicory root roasted and ground, a bitter brew that mimics the darkness, but none of the comfort. You might have a jar of jam, a dark gelatinous substance made from turnips, parsnips, and a hint of chemical sweetener, labelled with patriotic fervour as apple and black currant substitute. A small spoonful of this on the bread is a concession to memory, a ghost of sweetness. This is the heart of the housewife's war. It is a daily campaign fought with recipe books titled Food in Wartime, and the kitchen is the key to victory. It is a battle of ingenuity against scarcity. You learn how to make pastry without lard using mashed potato. You discover that a spoonful of oatmeal can thicken a soup meant to feed 6 with 1 bone. You're bombarded with government posters and newspaper columns urging you to waste nothing, to eat slowly, to fill up on potatoes. This official wisdom is met with a quiet, pragmatic scepticism. The posters show smiling women cheerfully carving a joint of meat that does not exist. Your reality is a saucepan of lentils. The tension is constant between the patriotic ideal of cheerful sacrifice and the grinding reality of trying to keep a family's body and spirit fed on diminishing returns. You eat standing at the kitchen sink or sitting on the edge of a chair. The tea is hot, and that is its main virtue. The bread fills a space in your stomach, a heavy, dull presence. The substitute jam offers a cloying, unfamiliar sweetness that is somehow sadder than no sweetness at all. This is not a meal to enjoy. It is a fuel to be ingested, a calculation of calories and morale. You are conscious of every mouthful, knowing precisely what was sacrificed to secure it. The children eat theirs quickly, silently. They do not ask for more. They have learned the new language of want. With the thin warmth of the tea inside you, you turn to the final morning ritual, the one that feeds not the body but the anxious mind. You might unfold the newspaper, its pages crisp and smelling sharply of ink. The headlines are never good, but they are rarely explicit. They speak of adjustments to the line, strategic withdrawals, heavy enemy casualties. The language is a shield, bureaucratic and vague, designed to convey stalemate or loss without inciting panic. Your eyes do not linger on these. They scan, then dart, almost against your will, to the dense columns of small type tucked away on an inside page. The casualty lists. Here, the war loses all abstraction. Here it is a relentless catalogue of names, ranks and regiments. Your heart becomes a cold, tight fist. You do not read the list. You scour it. Your eyes move down the column, rejecting name after unknown name, a terrifying lottery until you find the one you dread, or until you reach the end, breath held, and release it in a shaky exhalation that is not relief, but a postponement. The absence of a name today means nothing for tomorrow. If you cannot afford a paper, the news comes from other sources. The public bulletin board outside the town hall or post office becomes a site of pilgrimage. Here, amidst official notices about blackout times and salvage drives, are the handwritten lists, the typed sheets pinned up each day. Here, people do not just read, they stand and watch others read. They see a stranger's face crumple, a hand fly to a mouth. They hear the stifled sob. It is a brutal, communal theatre of grief. Neighbours share what they have heard on the wireless, the crackling, authoritative voice of the BBC shaping the official story. Rumours travel faster, weaving through queues and workplaces. A terrible battle at a place with an unpronounceable name, a hospital ship sunk, a new call for conscripts. This daily intake of news is its own kind of nourishment, bitter and necessary. It sets the tone for the hours ahead. A report of a victory, however small, can lift the communal spirit a fraction, make the margarine taste less of defeat. The more common litany of loss simply confirms the world you live in, hardening the resolve around your heart into something brittle and cold. You fold the paper away or turn from the board. The taste of substitute coffee is still in your mouth, but it is now mingled with the metallic flavour of dread. Breakfast is over. The day's work awaits, but you're already carrying a weight no meal could ever lighten. You have been fed and you have been warned. You step out into the street and the city immediately asserts its new wartime identity. The air, still thick with the morning chill, now carries a complex symphony of smells that were once background notes but have become the dominant scent of the age. It is the ever-present bass note of coal smoke, now undercut by sharper, more alarming aromas. The astringent bite of carbolic soap and disinfectant that lingers around hospital buildings and public transport. The sour tang of unwashed wool and bodies pressed too close, the dry, papery scent of ration book paper, and through it all, the faint, ever-present ghost of cordite, a metallic whisper on the wind from the munitions works on the outskirts. You join the flow of people, a river of dark coats and pale faces moving with a collective, weary determination. The sound is a low rumble of footsteps, the occasional cough, the distant clang of a tram bell. Private motor cars are a rare sight, relics of a more frivolous time. Petrol is for the war. The streets belong to the clattering, overcrowded trams, to lumbering horse-drawn drays, and to a forest of bicycles, their tyres thin, their riders hunched against the weather. Your journey is a lesson in reading the city's scars. You do not walk through the London of guidebooks. You walk through a city that has been turned inside out, its private functions made public, its ornaments sacrificed. You pass a grand government building, its classical columns now partially obscured by thousands of sandbags, heaped like beige bricks into makeshift bastions. They look temporary, but the grass growing in the damp burlap suggests otherwise. A handsome hotel, once a place of luxury, now has a crisp official sign by its door and military staff, hurrying in and out. It has been commandeered as an office or a convalescent home. In the parks, the change is most profound. The ordered flower beds are gone. In their place are rigorous grids of vegetable plots, little armies of cabbages, potatoes and leeks standing to attention. Dig for victory is not a suggestion here. It is a reality of turned earth and a hopeful, muddy labour. You see a statue on a plinth, a bronze statesman or a winged victory. Look closer. Often, the metal railing that once surrounded it is gone, donated to a scrap drive to be melted into shells. The statue itself seems oddly exposed, vulnerable without its fence, a symbol stripped of its defences, and everywhere there are the uniforms. They are not just on the soldiers home on leave, walking with a stiff, deliberate pace, their eyes often holding a distance no civilian can cross. The uniforms are on the women too, the dark blue of the fleece women, the sensible skirts and jackets of the voluntary aid detachment nurses, the practical overalls of the tram conductress. The city is a pageant of service and sacrifice, a constant visual reminder that every person has a role, a duty. The old social tapestry woven with threads of class and leisure has been unpicked and rewoven into a fabric of collective utility. You reach your point of embarkation, a tram stop or the mouth of an underground station. The crowd condenses here, a tight pack of bodies all facing the same direction, a collective organism waiting for its transport. When the tram arrives, its windows often replaced by wooden boards after bomb blasts, it is already full. There is a soft collective groan, but no one steps back. You press forward. The step up is a manoeuvre requiring balance and a certain ruthless pragmatism. You find a space inside, your body immediately pressed against strangers. The air is warm, thick, and impossibly dense. It is the olfactory map of the home front, the smell of wet wool steaming, of cheap soap, of packed lunches wrapped in paper, of hair oil, of anxiety sweat, and the pervasive throat-catching note of disinfectant sprayed to ward off influenza. You hold on to a leather strap, your arm brushing against the person next to you. There is no eye contact. Everyone looks at the floor or at the advertisements pasted above the windows, which now urge you to buy war bonds or to report any talk of peace as treasonous defeatism. The tram lurches forward, its progress slow and halting. The conductor, often a woman with a face set in lines of formidable patience, works her way through the crush, collecting fares with a clipped efficiency that brooks no conversation. The coins pass from hand to hand over heads, a strange, intimate communion of commerce conducted through a forest of bodies. If your journey takes you underground, the experience is even more profound. The tube stations have become the city's subconscious, its dark collective shelter. Even during the day, the memory of the nighttime raids lingers. You descend the stairs and the air changes, becoming warmer, damper, carrying the unmistakable mineral smell of the deep earth, mixed with that same human odour of crowdedness, now underscored by the scent of damp concrete and rust. The platforms are crowded, the trains even more so. People read newspapers in the dim electric light, or simply stare into the black tunnel, their faces reflected in the grimy windows of the waiting carriages. Here, in this underworld, the city's anxiety is most palpable. It is a place of transit, but also of potential refuge, a duality that hangs in the air. You see signs pointing to designated shelter areas, see bundles of blankets tucked into corners, a silent testament to the nights spent here in fear. When the train arrives with a roaring rush of air, the boarding is another plight desperate scramble. You're packed into the carriage, a human wedge. The lighting is poor, casting everyone in a sickly yellow glow. The noise is a tremendous metallic roar that drowns all thought, leaving only the physical sensations of movement, of pressure, of heat. As you travel, glimpses of the wounded city flash past the occasional unboarded window. A row of houses with their fronts sheared off. The interiors exposed like a doll's house. Rooms papered in florid patterns now open to the rain and the public gaze. Workmen clearing a site. The rubble sorted into neat piles of reusable brick and splintered wood. A church with a missing spire, the stump jagged against the grey sky. These sights are no longer shocking. They are part of the landscape, accepted with the same grim familiarity as the cues and the ration books. They are the physical scars on the city's skin, just as the tired faces are the scars on its soul. The journey is not long in distance, but it is exhausting in experience. It is a daily immersion in the collective body of a city under strain. By the time you step off the tram or emerge from the underground station, blinking in the diffused daylight, you feel already worn down. The cool air, even if damp and dirty, feels like a reprieve. You've traversed not just space, but the layered realities of your time, from the domestic anxiety of the queue, through the communal ordeal of transport, past the physical evidence of violence, and now you have arrived at the place where you will contribute your own labour to the vast, grinding engine of the war. The journey has stripped away any lingering illusion of separateness. You are part of this machine, a small, essential cog, and the city's wounds are now yours to bear witness to, and to work tirelessly to somehow mend. The transition is abrupt, final. One moment you're in the muted, grimy world of the city street, the next you pass through a high gate, show your identity card to a watchful guard, and enter another realm entirely. The sound hits you first, not as a noise you hear, but as a physical force. It is a deep, shuddering roar, a cacophony of metal shrieking against metal, of steamer pistons driving with relentless force, of machinery that never stops day or night. It enters through your ears and vibrates in your teeth, settles in the hollow of your chest. The air is different here. It is warm, thick, and carries a chemical sharpness that immediately catches at the back of your throat. It smells of hot oil, of scorched metal, of something sour and acrid you cannot name, and beneath it all, a faint, sweetish, dangerous scent like bitter almonds. This is the smell of the war itself, distilled into vapour and particulate. This is a munitions works, a vast shed-like structure stretching into the dim distance, lit by long rows of hanging electric bulbs that cast a harsh, shadowless light. The space is a new geometry, one of pure function. There are no curves, no decoration, only the straight lines of workbenches, the vertical pillars of machinery, the horizontal belts driving overhead, a ceaseless, dizzying motion. And everywhere there are women, hundreds of them, thousands perhaps, moving in the spaces between the machines like parts of a great engine themselves. They wear overalls or simple dark dresses covered by thick aprons. The hair is pinned back tightly under caps or scarves, a safety regulation that also feels like a uniform, erasure of the feminine. You join them, finding your locker, changing into your own work clothes. The fabric is coarse, stiff with starch and the residue of yesterday's labour. You tie your cap, tucking every last strand of hair away. You're no longer Mrs. So-and-so from such and such a street. You're a number, a pair of hands assigned to a station. Your work defines your world. It might be at a lathe, turning rough metal cylinders into the precise casings for shells. Your hands learn the vibrations, your ears the specific pitch that means the cut is true. It is repetitive, monotonous, demanding absolute attention. A moment's lapse, a slip of the tool, and the piece is ruined. Precious material and time wasted. The foreman's eyes are always watching, or perhaps your work is filling those casings. You sit at a long bench with other women, handling the pale yellow granules of TNT. It is delicate, deadly work. The powder stains everything it touches. It dusts your arms, your face. It works its way under your nails. It tints your skin and the roots of your hair a strange sunny yellow. They call you and your co-workers canary girls. It is a nickname born of black humour and grim reality. The yellow is a badge of service, but also a mark of contamination. You breathe it in. It gives you headaches that pound in time with the machinery. It turns your urine a bright, alarming orange. It can make you dizzy, nauseous. You're told it is harmless in small amounts, but you see the women who have been here longer, their complexions permanently sallow, their coughs dry and persistent. Your body is absorbing the war, molecule by molecule. The male overseers and foremen move through the aisles with a complex air. There is respect, sometimes grudging for the sheer output, for the reliability of this new workforce. The women, they say, have a better attention to detail, a finer touch for the precision work. But there is also unease, a paternalistic suspicion. They are not used to commanding women in this way, to seeing them in this gritty, muscular realm. Their instructions can be overly sharp or, conversely, awkwardly gentle, never finding the right tone. You learn to listen to the machines more than the men. The machines are honest in their demands. Your body protests, then adapts. Muscles you never knew you had ache with a deep, fiery persistence. Your shoulders knot from hunching over the bench. Your fingers grow strong but stiff, the skin dry and cracked from chemicals and constant washing. At night, the roar of the factory echoes in the silence of your own skull. You dream of gears and conveyor belts. The physical transformation is profound, but so is the psychological one. There is a fierce, unspoken pride in this work. You're not just earning a wage that is, for the first time in your life, truly your own, a tangible weight in your pay packet each Friday. You're building the very things that might end this war. Every shell casing you perfect, every fuse you assemble, you're told, brings the boys home faster. The connection is abstract, but the belief is concrete. It is what gets you through the 10-hour shift, through the headaches and the aching bones. You're doing your bit, not with cheering and flag waving, but with sweat and skill and stained skin. The world outside ceases to exist. Time is measured by the shift whistle, by the progress of the pile of components at your elbow, by the growing hunger in your stomach. The noise forbids conversation. Communication is a language of nods, gestures, mouthed words. You're alone in a crowd, isolated by the tremendous sound, yet bound to these women by shared labour and shared risk. You learn to read their faces. The tight set of a mouth that means a headache is blooming behind the eyes. The slight flush that might be a fever coming on. The faraway look that means the mind has escaped to some quieter place, a dangerous luxury when your hands are handling death. Then, the shrill blast of the lunch whistle cuts through the roar. The machines do not stop, but your line does. The relief is instantaneous, a physical unclenching. You and your benchmates file out to a designated area, a bleak yard or a crowded canteen. The relative quiet is jarring. Your own voice sounds strange and thin in your ears. This is when you become individuals again. You unwrap your lunch, the same rough bread, a scrap of cheese, perhaps a hard-boiled egg if you're lucky. You eat slowly, savouring the simple act of not working. And this is when the letters come out. They are pulled from apron pockets, from handbags carefully unfolded. The precious letters from France, from Flanders, from the sea, The women who can read aloud softly, sharing the censored, cheerful banalities. The food is not bad. The rain here is something awful. Hope you're keeping well. Everyone listens, reading between the lines, hearing the things that are not said. Sometimes a photograph is passed around. A young man in uniform looking solemnly at the camera, his face still soft. There are nods, murmured words of encouragement. He looks well. Fine boy. When a woman receives no letter, she says nothing. She simply eats, her eyes on her food. The space around her becomes delicate, respected. Everyone knows the meaning of that silence. Other times, the news is not good. A woman might arrive with red-rimmed eyes, her face set in stone. She does not need to speak. The telegram has come. The official notification. A space opens around her, wider this time, filled with a helpless, aching respect. No one knows what to say. Words are useless things. Someone might silently push a cup of tea towards her. A hand might briefly rest on her shoulder. Then the whistle blows again, the terrible commanding sound. You rise. You fold away the letters, the photographs, the private grief. You tuck them back into your pocket and you walk back to the bench. The roar swallows you once more. The machine awaits. Your hands, which moments ago held a tender letter, now pick up a cold piece of steel or a scoop of yellow powder. The transition is brutal, but it is necessary. The work must go on. There is a strange mercy in the noise, in the all-consuming demand of the task. It leaves no room for thought, for the images those letters conjure. For the next few hours you're just a pair of hands, a body operating a machine, a small, essential part of the great, roaring engine of war. The yellow tinge on your skin deepens imperceptibly. The headache returns, a dull throb behind your eyes. You work on, the pay packet and the pride and the fear, all wound together into the relentless rhythm of your labour. You're a canary in the coal mine of the empire, singing not with your voice but with the steady, unending work of your hands, a bright, stained testament to a world turned upside down. Not every path leads to the roaring shed or the clattering tram. For many men, and for a city trying to mimic a semblance of normal function, the day leads to quieter, older destinations. These places, the office, the shop, the school, are bastions of a fading world, islands where the pre-war rhythms are performed with a kind of desperate fading fidelity. Here, the war is not a physical assault on the senses, but a slow, cold seep of absence and inadequacy. You enter an office building, perhaps in the city, its grand facade now streaked with grime, its marble lobby missing the bustle of young clerks. The staircase is dim, the gas jets turned low to a mere whisper of flame to conserve fuel. The climb is through layers of a deepening gloom. The office you enter is a cavern of shadows. What light there is falls in weary shafts through windows that have not been properly cleaned in years, filtered through the ever-present grid of anti-blast tape. Desks that once sat two now often sit one, the empty space a silent, accusatory presence. The air is cold, still, smelling of dust, ink and the faint, greasy aroma of packed lunches. The sound is a muted tapestry, the scratch of a pen, the rustle of paper, the low dry cough of the man at the next desk, a cough that speaks of damp rooms and insufficient food. You sit. Your work is familiar, perhaps the same ledger you kept in 1913. The figures you enter, however, tell a different story. They speak of contracts for uniforms, for wire, for tinned beef. They track the dizzying costs of everything, the shrinking profits, the strange, unsettling new reality of dealing with firms now run by women whose husbands or fathers are gone. The women in the office, the typists and secretaries are different now too. They are not the genteel daughters of colleagues waiting for marriage. They're often sharper, more efficient, their manner direct, out of necessity. They handle correspondence you once would have shielded them from, concerning shipments lost to U-boats or payments for wooden limbs. There is an unspoken friction, a subtle rearrangement of the old order that leaves you feeling oddly displaced in your own chair. The psychological weight here is of a peculiar nagging kind. If you're a man of fighting age but deemed unfit, a weak heart, poor eyesight, a old injury, you carry a quiet, constant shame. You see it in the way you avoid the eyes of women in mourning black. You feel it when a boy in a junior uniform gives you a look that is not quite a salute, not quite a dismissal. You develop a repertoire of explanations offered casually, almost thrown away. Try to enlist, of course. Doctor said the lungs. They need us here, keeping things ticking over. The phrases sound hollow even to your own ears. Your work, once a source of identity and pride, now feels like an excuse. You cling to its rituals with exaggerated care. The precise blotting of a signature, the orderly stacking of files, the strict adherence to pre-war procedure. These become small, defiant acts against the chaos outside, proofs that you are still a competent, necessary man, even if the battlefield is a column of numbers, not a trench in Flanders. The school, when you enter as a teacher or a visitor, is a chamber of echoes. The high ceilings seem to swallow sound, but not the children's coughs. It is a dry, persistent sound, heard throughout the day, a chorus of small bodily protests against the damp, the cold, and the meagreness of their rations. Their faces are often pale, their frames thin beneath handed-down uniforms. They are learning a new curriculum, one steeped in the war. Geography lessons trace the front lines in France. Arithmetic problems calculate shell production rates. History is a blunt instrument of national glory. They sing patriotic songs with a fervour that is touching and terrible, yet their energy is subdued. The boisterousness of childhood has been tempered by a world of cues and whispered anxiety. As a teacher, you strive to maintain standards, to drill the multiplication tables and the kings and queens, but your authority feels fragile. You are not the headmaster who left for the front, a figure of unquestioned command. You are a replacement, and the children sense it. Your duty expands beyond pedagogy. You're a watchman for signs of hunger, for chilblains, for the hollow look of a child who has lost an older brother. You dispense chalk and spelling tests, but you're really dispensing a fragile, carefully managed normality, a thin shell of routine you hope will protect them, just a little, from the vast, incomprehensible storm outside. The shop, if you're a shopkeeper or a clerk behind a counter, is a theatre of quiet disappointment. The space feels too large now. The shelves, once densely packed with colourful tins and boxes, are islands of goods in a sea of empty wood. What you do have is displayed with a kind of mournful prominence. The stock is a sad, sparse collection of substitutes and last resorts. The light is poor, the atmosphere hushed. Customers do not browse. They arrive with a specific hopeful question that you will almost certainly have to dash. Your role has changed. You're no longer a merchant offering choice and quality. You're an administrator of scarcity, a gatekeeper of the ration book. You are the one who must say no, who must explain that the butter allocation is delayed, that the tea is dust, that there will be no oranges this week or next. You see the light fade from their eyes, a tiny defeat you administer a dozen times a day. It breeds a peculiar form of guilt. You take no pleasure in your dwindling shelves. Your expertise, once based on knowledge of goods and markets, is now based on memorizing regulations and placating complaints. The relationship with customers, once familiar and gossipy, is now strained by the tension of distribution. You try to maintain the old courtesies. Good morning, madam. A bitter day, sir. But they ring false against the backdrop of empty space and shared deprivation. In all these places, the dim office, the echoing school, the sparse shop, the great unspoken effort is one of conservation. It is an attempt to hold a line, to preserve the forms and manners of a civilization that is unravelling by the hour. The work done here feels both essential and utterly peripheral. It keeps the paperwork of the war moving, it educates the next generation amidst the chaos, it distributes what little sustenance there is, but it lacks the visceral, heroic sheen of the factory or the front. It is maintenance, not construction. It is the careful, weary work of preventing total collapse, of proving that some part of the old world can still function, that clocks can still be punched, lessons can still be learned, transactions can still be made. The men who do this work move through their days with a subdued air. Their backs are not bent from physical labour, but their shoulders carry a different weight. The weight of being left behind, of keeping the home fires burning to a precise, economical flame, of tending the ghost of a life that may never return. They are the anchor of a ship that is being torn apart by the storm, holding fast to a seabed that itself feels less and less certain. Their battle is not against an enemy they can see, but against a creeping sense of irrelevance, fought one careful ledger entry, one patiently given lesson, one apologetic shake of the head at an empty shelf at a time. There are places in the city where the war is not a background hum, but a deafening concentrated reality. They are not factories producing its instruments, but theatres where its consequences are displayed in raw human form. The great railway stations are the city's valves, pumping its lifeblood in and out, and now that lifeblood is predominantly pain, you approach such a place, and the air changes long before you see the platforms. It is a thick, complex smell that overpowers the usual coal smoke. It is the astringent, nose-stinging scent of disinfectant, laid down in liberal quantities, mixing with the smell of steam and hot oil, of unwashed bodies, of damp wool, of fear and expectation. The sound is a constant roaring surf of humanity, shouted orders, the hiss of engines, the clatter of trolleys, the murmur of 1,000 strained conversations, and cutting through it all at irregular intervals, the haunting two-tone wail of an ambulance siren, a sound that makes everyone pause and look. The station is a study in brutal juxtaposition. On one platform, a scene of forced heartiness. Boys, they are really just boys, in new, ill-fitting khaki, their faces scrubbed and pale. Families cling to them, mothers straightening collars that do not need straightening, fathers offering gruff, useless advice, sweethearts trying to smile through trembling lips. There are jokes, too loud. There are promises to write. There is a brittle, awful cheer. The whistle blows, a final desperate clutch. Then they are gone, swallowed by the train, their faces pressed to the windows, becoming pale ovals that recede into the smoke. The platform empties, leaving behind a litter of paper and a silence that feels heavier than the noise. On another platform, often shrouded in a more discreet, sombre atmosphere, the traffic flows the other way. The trains here are marked with red crosses. The doors open not to a surge of eager passengers, but to a slow, careful procession. Stretchers are borne by orderlies, each carrying a shape under a grey blanket. Some blankets are still. Others move, a leg shifting, an arm rising to a face. You see the faces then, not as faces, but as landscapes of bandage and shadow, eyes staring out from layers of gauze. The walking wounded disembark, a shambling line of men supporting each other, limbs missing, eyes vacant, uniforms stained and torn. The smell here deepens, the disinfectant failing to mask a coppier, more intimate scent. The crowd that gathers here is different. It is mostly women, some in the uniform of voluntary organisations, their faces set in expressions of professional calm, others simply wives and mothers scanning each broken form with a hope so acute it is agony. The station announcements here are hushed. The reunions are not joyous. They're quiet, tearless, a matter of finding a name on a list and matching it to a broken body. This is the city taking its breath back, a ragged, painful inhalation. From the station, the river of pain flows to the hospitals. Grand hotels, schools, even private mansions have been transformed into places of healing, their placards now reading Auxiliary Military Hospital. You enter one, perhaps as a visitor, perhaps as a volunteer. The smell is a cleaner version of the stations. Carbolic soap, ether, boiling linen, and the sweet, cloying smell of infection. The sounds are the rustle of starch, the low moans from behind screens, the crisp instructions of nurses. The wards are long rooms where rows of iron beds replace the ballroom's chandeliers or the schoolroom's desks. Here, the abstract casualty becomes agonizingly specific. You see the physics of violence enacted on the human body. The empty trouser leg pinned up, the sleeve flat on the sheet, the faces remade by surgeons, patched and sewn into masks that will never again show expression. But it is the unseen wounds that are perhaps more unnerving. The men who lie whole and still, staring at the ceiling as if it contains the horrors they have brought back with them. The ones who jump at the sound of a dropped tray. The ones who scream in their sleep. The nurses and volunteers, most of them women, move through this landscape of shattered flesh and spirit. Their work is a strange, sacred combination of the mundane and the monumental. They change dressings on wounds that seem to have no bottom. They write letters home for men whose hands shake too much to hold a pen. They spoon broth into mouths that would rather remain silent. They offer a calm voice, a cool hand on a fevered brow, a moment of unshockable compassion in the face of utter ruin. This is the other female front. It confers no pay packet, only a different kind of exhaustion. It is patriotic duty of the highest order, praised in newspapers and speeches. But the praise rings hollow in the face of the work itself. For these women, the war ceases to be about maps and morale. It is about pus and gangrene and phantom pain. It is about holding a basin while a boy coughs his lungs out from gas. It is about learning to see the human being trapped inside the nightmare. It is a brutal education, a window thrown open onto a reality so cruel it changes you forever. You leave the hospital, the smell of carbolic clinging to your clothes, the echo of those quiet moans in your ears. The grey street outside feels like an illusion, a fragile stage set. You have seen the true engine of the war, and it's not a factory, but an endless hungry machine that consumes youth and vitality and returns only broken remnants to be patched and comforted by hands that are themselves growing weary of the endless, sorrowful tide. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The fear of the sky is a different kind of shadow. It does not reside in a specific building you can enter or leave. It hangs over everything, a diffuse, persistent anxiety that tightens your shoulders and tunes your ears to a certain frequency of silence. The Zeppelin raids of the early years have given way to the Gotha bombers, heavier, deadlier. They come less often now, but the terror is more precise, more modern. The threat has been internalized. It lives in the daily rituals, the careful checking of the blackout, the knowledge of the nearest shelter, the involuntary glance upwards at the sound of any sustained droning, even if it is just a motor car. You learn to read the sounds of the night with a new, fearful literacy. The most terrifying sound is not the explosion, but what can come before it. The sudden, absolute cessation of familiar noise. The distant engine hum you had not even consciously registered stops. In that moment of silence, the city seems to freeze. Hearts stop. Then, perhaps, comes the wail of the maroons, the explosive warnings from the rooftops, or the frantic ringing of police bells. The cry goes up, muffled but sharp. Take cover! It is not panic, but a dreadful practiced efficiency. You know what to do. You grab the child, the pre-packed bag with a few documents, a blanket. You move quickly down the stairs, not running, but walking with a terrible purpose. You're joining a river of shadows flowing towards the underground. The tube station at night is London's secret subterranean city. The platform you hurry to by day becomes a packed makeshift dormitory. The air is thick, damp, close with the smell of humanity, of damp earth, of packed bodies. Families claim small patches of concrete, spreading blankets. Children, woken from sleep, whimper or stare wide-eyed. Elderly couples sit close together, saying nothing. There is a strange, quiet community here. People share thermos flasks of tea. A woman offers a sweet to a crying child that is not her own. Men who might not speak in the daylight exchange rumours in low tones about where the bombs are falling. You find a space, sit with your back against the cool ceramic tiles, and wait. The world above is a mystery. You hear nothing down here, only the nervous shuffling and breathing of hundreds of souls packed into the earth. The wait is an agony of imagination. Every minute stretches. Is it over? Was that a thump or just the sigh of the tunnel? You see the strain on every face, lit by the low emergency lighting. This is not living. This is interment, a voluntary burial to escape a death from the air. You remember a past raid. The memory is not a story you tell. It is a series of sense impressions burned into you. The unmistakable, swelling thunder of the engines directly overhead, a sound that vibrated in your bones, then the whistling, a rising, shrieking note that seemed to tear the sky. The crash. Not a single sound, but a sequence. A monstrous, tearing bang, then a rain of falling debris, glass, masonry, timber, a symphony of destruction. The smell that followed. Dust, sharp and choking, the acrid scent of explosive and underlying it, the terrible, sweet smell of gas from a broken main. Then the voices rising from the silence. Not screams, at first, but calls. Over here! Help me! The clatter of ambulance bells, the shouts of firemen and wardens. The following morning, walking past the damage, a house sliced open, a sitting room exposed, a floral armchair perched on the edge of an abyss. The careful, weary work of clearing, of searching. The quiet groups of neighbours offering tea to the rescue workers. The peculiar numb politeness that follows catastrophe. This is the shadow that never lifts. It means you never feel truly safe in your own home. For your home can become a target simply by existing. It means the sound of an aircraft engine, even in the distant peaceful daylight, can cause a fleeting clutch of fear in your chest. It means you appreciate solid, low ceilings and the deep silence of the countryside with a new intensity. The fear of the raid becomes a background condition, a lens through which you view the night. It is the reason you sleep lightly. It is the reason you listen even in your dreams. The city endures it, as it endures everything. The shelters are cleaned, the routines re-established, the damage patched with wood and tarpaulin. Life goes on, but it is a life lived with one ear tuned to the sky. A life where the dark is not just an absence of light, but a canvas for the imagination of terror. The shadow of the Zeppelin is long, and though the aircraft are different now, the shadow remains, a cold, constant companion in the London night. The grey afternoon light begins to fail, softening into a murky twilight that seems to leach the last remnants of colour from the world. The work whistle has blown, the machines have fallen silent, and you join the great exodus once more. But this journey home carries a different quality than the mornings. The energy is spent, shoulders slump a little more. The footsteps on the pavement are slower, a tired shuffle rather than a purposeful stride. There is no rush to begin the day's labour, only the weary return to the night's duties, the first of which is the same as the morning's, the queue. The evening queue is a mirror of the dawn, but the reflection is darker, the lines on the faces deeper. You take your place, the cold now a familiar companion seeping through your clothes. The basket on your arm is empty, waiting to be filled with the possibilities for supper, possibilities you know are narrow and getting narrower. The silence here is different too. The morning queue had a tense, hopeful energy, a focus on the day ahead. The evening queue is steeped in the fatigue of the day that has passed. Conversations, when they happen, are lower, more frank. The veneer of cheerful stoicism wears thin as the light fades. Here, in this shuffling line of shadows, information is exchanged not as hopeful intelligence, but as shared resignation. Heard they're cutting the bacon ration again next month. The coal man said deliveries might be delayed, the railways are packed with troop trains. My sister in Kent says they've had no butter for a fortnight. The news is rarely good. It circles around the central, unspoken fear that it will get worse. that the endurance required will outstrip the resources left to endure with. Yet, within this grim communion, there is also a stubborn, pragmatic sharing. Recipes are exchanged like secret codes for survival. A teaspoon of barley makes the soup stretch further. If you soak the saltfish overnight, it's less like leather. Mash a cooked parsnip into the potatoes adds a bit of sweetness. This is the wisdom of the home front, earned through failure and rare success. There are complaints too, muttered sotto voce, directed at the faceless bureaucracy of the rationing system, at the shopkeepers suspected of hoarding, at the unfairness of it all. These complaints are a safety valve, a tiny release of the pressure that builds in a world of constant denial. You stand, you listen, you offer a nod of agreement. You're all in this together, a society bound not by prosperity, but by shared scarcity. When you finally reach the counter, the transaction is even more bleak than in the morning. The best of whatever little there was is often gone. You make do with what remains, a few sad-looking potatoes, a handful of lentils, a small piece of cheese that feels more like a token than food. You pay, you tuck your precious diminished goods into your basket, and you turn for home. The walk back is through gathering darkness, the blackout curtains already being drawn in the windows you pass. The weight in your basket is slight, but the weight on your spirit is heavy. The calculation for supper has already begun. The kitchen is cold, and you light the gas with a sense of grim purpose. The rituals of wartime cooking are performed under the weak, jaundiced light of the mantel. The saucepan is filled with water, the precious vegetables scrubbed and chopped with a care that borders on reverence, every peel saved for stock. The small piece of meat, if you have one, is examined, its fat trimmed and rendered first to start the cooking. A stew is the usual destination, a slow simmer that promises warmth and a kind of fullness, if not flavour. The smells that rise are wholesome but dull, the earthy scent of root vegetables, the faint aroma of herbs from this tiny, hoarded bundle, the underlying note of the coal-fired range. It is not the rich, complex smell of a pre-war kitchen. It is the smell of necessity. When the meal is ready, it is brought to the table. The table itself feels too large. Chairs sit empty, their absence a physical presence. A place might still be set out of habit, then removed with a quiet, awkward haste. Or it might be left, a silent memorial. The serving of the food is a ceremony of fairness and sacrifice. The meagre piece of meat is divided with surgical precision. The children's plates are watched, their portions secretly compared by keen young eyes to ensure no favouritism. The adults take less, claiming a lack of hunger. The conversation is sparse, orbiting the safe, mundane planets of the day's small events, the weather, a bit of news from a neighbour, a letter from a relative in the country, the front, the war, the missing. These are dangerous celestial bodies, their gravitational pull too strong. To speak of them directly at the meal is to risk the fragile structure of the evening collapsing into raw anxiety or grief. So they're talked around, hinted at. I wrote to David today, a mother might say, and everyone understands the unasked question. The children, sensing the tension, eat quickly, their eyes occasionally darting to the empty chair. They know not to ask for more. They know the rules of this new hungry world. The supper is consumed not for pleasure, but for fuel, and for the fragile sense of normalcy the shared act provides. When the bowls are empty, scraped clean, a quiet settles. The small victory of a hot meal inside you is tempered by the knowledge that the same calculation begins again tomorrow. The washing up is done in minimal water, the scraps saved. The kitchen is returned to its state of cold readiness. The brief warm interlude is over. Afterwards, in the parlour if you're lucky enough to have a scrap of coal for the fire, or huddled in the kitchen for its residual warmth, the flickers of leisure begin. They are fragile things, easily extinguished. You might go to the cinema, the flickering black and white images offering escape into stories of romance or comedy that feel like dispatches from another universe. but the escape is never complete. Before the feature, the newsreels play. Here, the war becomes startlingly, immediately visual. You see the jerky, grainy footage of soldiers marching through mud, of guns firing, of blasted landscapes. You see the Prime Minister speaking, his gestures urgent. The images are silent, accompanied by the bombastic narration of a commentator whose tone of inevitable victory clashes with the weary faces on the screen. The entertainment that follows feels thin, almost disrespectful. Or you might go to the pub. The air is thick with tobacco smoke and the smell of weak beer. The conversations here are louder, looser, fueled by alcohol and shared frustration. Opinions about the war, about the generals, about the government, are voiced here in a way they are not in the home. There are arguments, quickly made and quickly abandoned. There are songs, old music hall tunes, sung with a raucous, defiant sentimentality. For an hour you can forget. But when you step back out into the blacked out street, the silence and the dark rush back in, a cold reminder. More often, leisure is found at home. A board game, its pieces worn smooth, pack of cards, the piano if you have one, its keys dusty. Someone plays a familiar tune and voices join in, softly at first, then with more feeling. The songs are often the sentimental ballads of the day, full of parting and longing. Singing them is a release, a shared expression of the emotion that is otherwise kept in careful check. But the most common, most important leisure activity is not leisure at all. It is the labour of the heart, letter writing. This is when the front enters the room directly. You sit at the table, the lamp pulled close, and you take out your pen and paper. Writing to the trench is an act of profound creativity and censorship. You must construct a world of cheerful normalcy from the threads of your depleted reality. You describe the small safe details. The cat had kittens, the vicar gave a dull sermon, the roses in Mrs. Henderson's garden are struggling but alive. You make jokes, you express pride, you ask gentle questions. You must be a lifeline to normality, anchor to the world he is fighting for. Every word is chosen to comfort, to reassure, to distract. It is exhausting work. And then there are the letters you receive. They're handled with reverence, read and reread until the paper grows soft. They too are works of fiction, written from a place of unimaginable stress to project calm. They talk of good mates, of the food being not bad, of hoping for a bit of leave. They ask after home, after the dog, after the weather. The gaps between the lines are wide and dark. You learn to read the handwriting itself. Is it steady or hurried? And the choice of subject. The longing for descriptions of mundane domestic life is a silent scream. The act of reading these letters, of deciphering their coded love and fear, is as draining as writing your own. This exchange of carefully sanitized correspondence is the central emotional drama of the home front, a delicate, endless dance of love and protection performed across a gulf of silent horror. When the letter is folded away, the piano falls silent, the last song fades. You're left with the quiet of the house and the vast, echoing quiet of the war beyond it. The flicker of leisure dies down, leaving only the embers of thought and the knowledge that the night with its own set of watches and fears is coming on. The official hour arrives, not with a bell but with a collective unspoken agreement. Daylight, what little feeble offering there was, has been withdrawn. The blackout returns. It is not a gradual dimming, it is a swift, decisive erasure. One moment you can see the shape of your hand against the chair. The next it is gone, swallowed by a dark so complete it feels like a velvet cloth dropped over your eyes. The single shaded lamp you have allowed yourself is extinguished. The gas mantle is turned to a dying pinprick of blue, then snuffed out. The candle is blown, its trailing wisp of smoke the only evidence it ever existed. You are left in a void. This dark is different from the dark of the countryside. That dark has depth, texture, stars. This dark is a solid thing, a wall pressed against the windows, a lid on the world. It amplifies sound to an almost unbearable intensity. Your own breathing becomes a loud rhythmic tide in your ears. The rustle of your clothing as you move is a crackle of static. The floorboard creaks under your own foot, and the sound is like a gunshot, making you freeze, heart hammering. You listen, not for something, but for everything. The scuttle of a mouse in the wall is an invasion. The distant bark of a dog is a coded message you cannot decipher. Every sound is a potential breach, a flaw in the perfect silence the city is trying to maintain. You move through your own home like a ghost, hands outstretched, memorizing the space by touch and memory. The edge of the table, the curve of the banister, the cool smoothness of the door handle. Navigation is a physical calculation. In the one room where a light is permitted, it is a prisoner under strict guard. A special lamp with heavy blackout shades, directing a small, pathetic pool of illumination straight down onto a tabletop, like a spotlight on a stage for a very small, very sad play. Here, in this tiny island of visibility, the evening's work is done. It is not rest. It is the quiet, meticulous labour of preservation. A woman darns a sock, her needle moving in and out of the thinning wool in the dim light, her eyes straining. A man tries to repair a child's shoe, the leather cracked and brittle, his fingers clumsy in the gloom. Someone reads a newspaper, holding it close to the lamp, the words swimming before tired eyes. Every action is slow, deliberate, conserving not just light but the energy to see by it. The preciousness of the fuel, the oil in the lamp, the gas in the mantle, the wax of the candle, is a constant pressure. You calculate the cost of every minute of illumination. Is this scene worth another 5 minutes of lamplight? Is this paragraph worth the strain? The light itself becomes a rationed commodity, hoarded and spent with anxious care. Conversation in this dim pool is hushed, as if the dark outside is listening. The stories told, the plans made, are small and immediate. Their anchors tossed into the blackness, tethering you to the tangible, the manageable. Outside, the city is a sketch erased, a map folded away. Inside, in your tiny cone of light, you're clinging to the last page of a book, afraid to reach the end and face the blankness that follows. The time comes to extinguish even this last guarded light. The ritual is performed with solemn care. The lamp is turned down, down, until the flame gutters and dies. The room is swallowed. You stand for a moment in the absolute black, letting your eyes adjust to a darkness they will never truly conquer. Then begins the final nightly inspection. You move to the window, your hands finding the edges of the blackout curtain in the dark. You feel along the seam where it meets the wall, searching for any telltale sliver of difference in temperature, any draft that might indicate a gap. You check and recheck. A chink of light is more than an infraction. It feels like a moral failure, a betrayal of your street, your neighbours, your city. It is a pinpoint of vulnerability in a world obsessed with defensive secrecy. Only when you're satisfied, when the dark is confirmed as absolute and secure, do you turn toward the stairs, toward bed. The physical weight of the day now settles upon you fully, a cloak of lead. Your muscles unclench in a slow, aching wave of fatigue. But as your body lets go, your mind, freed from the distractions of light and labour, tightens its grip. The fears you held at bay now advance. You lie in the cold bed, and your ears are your only scouts in the night. You listen past the breathing of the child beside you, past the sigh of the house, out into the silent streets. You're listening for a drone, the low thrumming note of engines in the sky. It is a sound you have heard in reality, and now in a 1,000 nightmares. Your mind conjures it from the whisper of the wind, from the distant rumble of a late train. Each false alarm sends a jolt of cold adrenaline through your veins, leaving you trembling in its wake. To calm yourself, you might reach for physical tokens, a photograph in a frame on the bedside table, its details invisible in the dark, but its presence a comfort. Your fingers might find a medal sent home in a letter, its cool metal and sharp edges a tangible connection to a valor you can only imagine. These objects are anchors in the swirling dark of thought. They are proof of love, of sacrifice, of a reality that existed before the blackout and might, somehow, exist again after it. The cold of the sheets begins to fade as your own body heat creates a small, fragile zone of warmth. The house ticks and settles around you. The watchfulness begins to blur at the edges, fatigue softening the sharp points of anxiety. You're on the threshold of surrender, not to sleep, but to the night's long, uncertain watch. Sleep, when it comes, is not a welcoming country. It is a tentative, disputed territory. The bed is rarely a place of solitary comfort. Children share it for warmth. An elderly relative might occupy another corner. You learn to sleep in the spaces left, your body curled, respectful of the other's presence. Their movements, their murmurs, their dreams become part of your own. The sleep itself is thin, a porous state. You drift into it lightly, aware of the cold spot where your feet have ventured too far from the shared warmth, aware of the child's whimper as a bad dream surfaces. You wake easily, completely, at the slightest unfamiliar sound, a door closing down the street, a fox crying in a distant garden. Each time you surface, you lie still, listening, passing the night's soundtrack until you can label each noise as harmless. Only then do you sink back, not into deep oblivion, but into that same shallow stream of half-awareness. The nightmares are frequent visitors. They are not fantastical. They are literal, brutal replays of fear. The whistle of a falling bomb, the crash of glass, the sight of a familiar street transformed into rubble. You wake from them with a gasp, your heart pounding, a frantic tattoo against your ribs, the sheets damp with sweat. It takes long minutes for the reality of the quiet, dark room to reassert itself. Sometimes it is a child who cries out, seized by a terror they cannot name. You reach for them in the dark, pull them close, whisper meaningless comforts into their hair, feeling the small racing heartbeat against your own. Your reassurance is a performance, a calm you do not feel, meant to soothe them back into a sleep you yourself cannot achieve. And there are the nights when the fear is real. The sirens do sound, the maroons explode. Then sleep is ripped away entirely, replaced by the old, practiced dread. The swift, efficient panic of gathering what you need, of shepherding sleepy, crying children down to the cellar or out into the street toward the tube. Those nights are not counted as sleep at all. They are lost time, hours spent in collective, shivering vigil in the earth, waiting for the all-clear. On the ordinary nights, the uneventful nights, sleep remains fragmented. You float in the liminal space between exhaustion and alertness. In these quiet, wakeful stretches, the future unfolds in your mind, not as hope, but as a series of vague grey questions. How much longer? What will be left? What will we have become? There are no answers. The questions simply hang in the dark, unanswered, until fatigue finally drowns them out and pulls you under for another hour of thin, troubled rest. The dawn, when it finally bleeds around the edges of the curtain, does not feel like a renewal. It feels like a reprieve. You have survived another night. The dark has released its grip for a few hours, and as the grey light grows, revealing the familiar worn contours of your room, you understand that this broken, watchful rest is not an interruption of life. It is the essential rhythm of life now, the slow, stubborn heartbeat of a city and a people simply trying to endure. The dark is at its deepest now. That hour just before the first, faint hint of grey threatens the eastern sky. It's the true heart of the night, a silence so profound it feels like a held breath after a long, slow exhalation. The city is still, not peacefully, but exhaustedly. The last late worker has stumbled home, the last warden has completed his round. Even the fear seems to have retreated, worn out by its own constant vigilance. In this absolute quiet, the house around you breathes softly. The cooling embers in the grate tick. A child sighs in a dream. The floorboards release the day's pressure with a soft, almost musical groan. This is the closest thing to peace you will know. You lie there, not sleeping, not quite awake. The weight of the day that has passed is a tangible thing upon your chest, a composite of all its small struggles, the ache in your feet from standing in the queue, the sting of chemical fumes still faint in your nose, the hollow, unsatisfied feeling left by the supper of substitutes, the metallic taste of dread from the casualty lists, the dry rasp of the child's cough, the leaden fatigue in your muscles. But beneath that weight there is something else, a stubborn, quiet pulse. It is the rhythm of return. However brutal the day, you return to this bed. However scant the meal, you shared it. However terrifying the news, you read the letter and wrote one back. This is not the heroism of charge or sacrifice. It is the heroism of the hinge, of the door that swings shut night after night, of the wheel that turns one more rotation. It is the courage of continuation. You think of the day that will come, and you know it will be the same cold awakening in the dark, the same fumbling for clothes worn thin by worry and work, the same walk to the same queue, to stand with the same neighbours, to hear the same rumours and receive the same meagre allotment, the same journey through the wounded streets to the place where your labour, physical or clerical, contributes its small, essential weight to the vast, grinding machine of the war. The same careful preparation of a meal that fills without nourishing, the same flickers of haunted leisure, the same labour of love in the letters you will write, the same nightly inspection of the blackout, the same listening in the dark. It is a circle, unbroken and seemingly endless. The variables are few, a different item missing from the shop, a new official restriction, a letter arriving or failing to arrive. The structure remains, a cage of routine that is also paradoxically the only thing holding you together. The heroism here is invisible. It leaves no monument, wins no medal. It is in the hands of the woman who, after a 10-hour shift filling shells, still finds the patience to darn a sock in the poor light. It is in the will of the clerk who maintains his precise ledgers while his spirit screams at the futility of it all. It is in the father who swallows his shame at not being at the front and tends his tiny vegetable plot with a tenderness he once reserved for his children. It is in the simple, devastating act of setting a place at the table for someone who may never come home again. It is the daily, hourly choice to care, to mend, to endure, to love in the face of a world doing its utmost to unravel all those things. It is the maintenance of the human in the face of the inhuman. As the first slender thread of grey light begins to define the edge of the blackout curtain, you feel the shift. The night's temporary armistice is ending. The city is beginning to stir in its sleep. A distant door closes. A single lonely bird tries out a note. Your body, attuned to this rhythm you never asked for, knows what comes next. There is no anticipation, only recognition. Another day of the same. And yet you will rise to meet it, not with hope perhaps, but with a determination so deep it has become instinct. You will do it because there is nothing else to do, because others depend on you, because to stop is to admit a defeat that is unthinkable. And now, gently, let this awareness seep into the waking world of your own room. Feel the difference in the silence around you. It is a silence you can break. The dark is one you can dispel with a thought, a gesture. The comfort of your bed, the certainty of a full pantry, the peace of a sky empty of threat. These are not small things. They are the outcomes of that long-awake endurance, the legacy bought with the quiet, desperate courage of millions of ordinary days, like the one you have just passed through. You're leaving that bed in that cold room, in that fearful, breathing city. The weight lifts from your chest. The sounds of a different century recede. But let a shadow of the feeling remain. Let the memory of that all-consuming dark give new value to the simple flip of a switch. Let the ghost of that hollow hunger linger as you next consider a meal. Let the echo of that watchful silence deepen your appreciation for a night spent in untroubled rest. The grey light strengthens behind the curtain. A cock crows far off. A cartwheel creaks on a street. The great, weary machine of London is engaging its gears once more. You have seen its innermost workings, felt the strain on every piston, heard the fragile rhythm of its heart. It is not beautiful. It is worn, patched, stained, and infinitely resilient. Now, open your eyes to your own light. Breathe your own unrationed air. The year 1917 recedes, not as a dream, but as a shared memory of a reality once lived. The people there are rising now, as they did every morning. They are pulling on their mended clothes, clutching their ration books, stepping out into the chill to face it all again. They do not know how it ends, they only know that it must be faced. And so, quietly we leave them there, on the brink of another day. For them, there is no closing line, no final curtain, there is only the continuation. Tomorrow London will wake again, as it always does.